Good morning and a Happy New Year to you. It's 6 months to the day since Labour's general election victory. But 2024's triumph already seems so last year. Nigel Farage reckons he's got thousands of new supporters. New Year's resolution: torment the Tories and lambast Labour. But will the reform surge survive the winter? The Prime Minister's now almost as unpopular with voters as, well, Elon Musk. New Year's resolution: work on that bedside manner, especially with the pensioners. Another week, another review. Wes Streeting's new delve into social care is Labour's 74th review since entering office. What will this one do differently? We'll probe the cost and timescale of the promised National Care Service with the Health Secretary. If Labour's under pressure to deliver, the Conservatives are under pressure to survive. With reform on the charge, we'll ask Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp if his leader will apologise for accusing Nigel Farage of lying over his membership figures. Reform enters the year feeling jubilant, but their cheerleader-in-chief, Elon Musk, drew criticism for supporting Tommy Robinson this week. Has the world's richest man become an expensive liability for the party? Deputy Leader Richard Tice joins us live. Andy Burnham is one of the faces of English devolution. We'll talk buses, housing, Labour's record, and of course, the weather, with the Mayor of Greater Manchester. And we'll get the broader view of how history will view Labour's first 6 months in office with the political historian Sir Anthony Seldon. Plus, with us throughout the show, former Financial Times editor Lionel Barber, Financial Times Whitehall editor Lucy Fisher, and journalist and broadcaster Mark Urban. Welcome to the first Sunday morning with Trevor Phillips of 2025. The Romans named the first month of the year after the two-faced god Janus. I don't think it was a conscious reference to the character of political leaders, but the idea is that this is a good moment to look back at what we learnt last year and also to look forward to what we might expect in the next 12 months. 2024 taught me above all that what happens over there, Ukraine, the Middle East, for example, matters over here more than at any time in my career. So in 2025, I expect to hear a lot from us about international migration, trade deals, NATO, and above all, the unpredictable President Trump. At home, the government still seems a bit surprised to be, well, in charge of the government. This week, they launched the latest in a blizzard of reviews and consultations, this time on social care. It won't report until 2028. It's almost as though they had sought power without quite knowing what they wanted to do with it. But that can't be right, surely. Happily for you and us, there will be loads to report on in 2025. The big spending review in the spring, major debates on devolution and assisted dying, for example. And there will always be the surprises that keep us on our toes. What Harold Macmillan once referred to as events, dear boy, events. Let's get started this new year with the government. A little earlier, I spoke to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Was it the most tactful New Year's message to advise people to turn up the heating after you'd taken their winter fuel allowance away?
Well, it is part of the advice that the NHS is giving to people during this cold snap to make sure that people are doing whatever they can to keep warm, to make sure, as we've been doing in the run-up to this winter, that people get vaccinated and so on. On the issue of
great advice, but they can't afford it, can they?
Also, just coming back to this issue of winter fuel allowance, the Chancellor did protect winter fuel allowance for the poorest pensioners. There is the warm homes discount people should see if they're eligible for. So in terms of protecting the poorest pensioners this winter, the government is taking action. Of course, that doesn't mean that getting rid of the winter fuel allowance for others has been a popular decision. But like many of the unpopular choices we've made in the last...
Not necessarily amongst the 9 million that you took it away from, and particularly the ones who are just above that threshold. I mean, there is an issue here, isn't there?
But bear in mind, we've kept the triple lock for pensioners, so it will continue to rise with the cost of living. And more generally, Trevor, there are decisions we've made in the last 6 months, like on winter fuel allowance or other measures to raise money in the budget that were unpopular. The reason we've been wanting to make unpopular decisions in the last 6 months is to get Britain out of the massive hole it was left in. So they might be unpopular decisions now, but I hope there'll be decisions that in the longer run people thank us for when they see the country improving, when they see waiting times in hospitals falling, when they see children having enough teachers in the classroom and breakfast clubs, when there are more police on the streets, all of the change that we want to deliver, which isn't easy given the scale of the challenge in the country, but that's what we're focused on in 2025.
Let's talk about the change that you are trumpeting today. You're promising that patients are going to have more choice of hospitals. Sounds great. But doesn't that mean just longer queues at the better hospitals?
No, I don't think so. I mean, a couple of things.
Well, I'm going to choose the best hospital, like everybody else.
So there's a practical issue here and there's a principled issue. The principled issue, which you've just touched on, is you, Trevor, are very well connected, very well informed, and probably in a better position, like I am, to exercise choice. So it can, let's hope nothing happens. But in terms of my own experience, when I was diagnosed with kidney cancer, I was inundated with colleagues in Parliament who were asking who my surgeon was, whether I was going to the best place for treatment, whether I was exercising my right to choose in the NHS. Now, it turned out I had one of the best kidney cancer surgeons in the country assigned to me by the NHS. So I was lucky. But frankly, someone like my mum, who's a cleaner, should have as much choice and power in the NHS as her son, the health secretary. And that's what I want to do. It's the principled issue. The practical issue...
But I think you're doing down your mum there. Your mum probably can compare the market as well as anybody else. And she can go on the websites, there are lots of them that will tell you what the best hospitals in your area are. The point is, you give everybody the choice of 5 hospitals. Most people are going to go to the best one, best meaning, best service, but also... ability to deliver treatment quickest.
Well, we're also as part of our plan, the Prime Minister's setting out tomorrow to cut waiting times from 18 months, where roughly they are now, to 18 weeks, which is what we promised in our plan for change, will also involve incentives for those fastest improving hospitals, capital incentives to incentivise them to work faster. We're giving the NHS the tools to do the job, to deliver on the manifesto commitments we made, both in terms of the 40,000 more appointments every week and the overall commitment to cut waiting times by the end of the Parliament. But here's the point about patient choice. I'll give you another example to take on that, the challenge. You said, well, wouldn't your mum look at the website? Another colleague in Parliament, very well informed, very well connected, had to come and ask me about how to exercise the patient choice she knew existed but wasn't sure how to access. So the more we can make this easier, more convenient for people, to modernise the service, not just make it faster, but make the NHS as easy to interact with as most of the other services we use in our lives, whether they're delivery apps or shopping apps, all of those services that we now use at the touch of a button in our pockets. The NHS should feel as easy, convenient and modern as the other services we use in our lives.
When we last spoke, or last time we spoke about this in the autumn, I asked you if you could commit to bringing down waiting lists to pre-pandemic levels by the end of this Parliament. You weren't willing to do it at that point. Will this plan deliver that objective?
Well, we're aiming to go faster. I mean, we're aiming to go faster.
So we'll do better than that.
Well, if you think back
to get it back to pre-pandemic levels before the Parliament.
Well, we haven't. I mean, when we left office in 2010, the Labour Party, we had the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction in history. NHS care has gotten worse and worse over the last 14 years. Everyone can see that. They need me to tell them. What the Prime Minister set out is a pace of improvement that not even the last Labour government achieved. So what we are setting out is going to be tough. It is ambitious, but we also know it is necessary so that people aren't dying avoidably, so that the economy isn't suffering because of the state of the waiting list. And that's why tomorrow you'll see a wide range of not just the investment the Chancellor announced, but the reform that needs to modernise the service and deliver that pace of change.
We'll hear what the Prime Minister has to say tomorrow, but just to be clear, you're saying that you are going to get us back, waiting list, back to the pre-pandemic levels before the end of this Parliament.
We want to reduce waiting times to 18 weeks by the end of the Parliament. That's the NHS constitutional challenge. That is a big, tough challenge that the country has set for us, and the Prime Minister's holding me to account as well as the public to deliver. So it is ambitious. It's not going to be easy, and that's why in today's newspapers and tomorrow when the Prime Minister sets out the plan, you will see a wide range of reform we're putting in place to modernise the NHS, to give it the tools to do the job, to bring it into the 21st century so the NHS doesn't go the way of Woolies and collapse, but is actually a service fit for the 21st century. And I do think it is that existential for the NHS, which is why both in opposition and now in government have placed such heavy emphasis on reform, not just investment.
Sorry to hurry you along, but I know your time is limited. Let's talk about your biggest challenge, I think, which is social care. And just before we get on to the Casey review which you set up, I want to clarify one thing. The last government said that it would set a cap on the lifetime social care costs of £86,000, raise the asset threshold below which you have a right to local authority support to £100,000. You scrapped that. Now, will Louise Casey have the permission to recommend the restoration of that policy or something like it when she comes back?
Yeah, of course she will, and I've no doubt that Louise Casey will take very seriously what Andrew Dilnot did, because it was a very good technical piece of work. The challenge we've got is that was a review commissioned by David Cameron when he was Prime Minister. The Conservatives didn't deliver on it, and when we came in, we were told the money was there and it would come in from October 2025, and we said we'll continue with it. When we came in, not only did we find the money wasn't there, but councils hadn't been prepared to deliver it from October 2025. So we will consider it, I'm sure, as part of the Casey Commission.
And if you have the money, you expect to raise those thresholds?
Well, I think that the objective, which is to stop people being hit with catastrophic care costs, is a good one. It's one of a number of challenges in social care, which is why in the last 6 months we've legislated to introduce the first fair pay agreements to tackle the workforce crisis, delivered the biggest expansion of carers allowance since the 1970s, an uplift in funding in the budget, and just this week I've announced £86 million to deliver almost 8,000 more improvements for home adaptations for disabled people.
Let's talk about
on top of the money that's been announced from April to deliver the same number again. So we are working on social care. Don't want people to think it's just gone into the review and we won't hear about it.
I'm not going to beat you around the head about the length of time. There is a 2028. It's quite a long way away. But let's just talk about what you're doing now. You've given £600 million to local councils. The social care providers wrote to the Chancellor after the budget saying that they're already short by £8.4 billion. They face a staff shortage of 131,000 people because people can earn more working in the supermarket. They can't afford to pay them more. The system's heading for collapse long before you even get your proposals out, isn't it?
Well, hang on a second. The first thing to say is that the first part of the Casey Commission, which is the actions we need to take during this Parliament, reports next year. So there'll be plenty going on. The second thing to say is that the budget committed £880 million specifically for social care, as well as increasing the spending power of local government significantly. In terms of that £8 billion figure...
It's not significant. They spend £28 billion and you're giving them 2% uplift.
Well, the challenge, Trevor, is obviously you just said what social care leaders are saying. I could say the same thing about challenges in the NHS, in primary care, in community services, in mental health, in hospitals. The Justice Secretary, if she was sat here, would say, my prisons are bursting and I've got court backlogs. The Work and Pensions Secretary would say, I've got child poverty to deal with and a rising benefits bill.
Well, exactly.
But this is the crux of the challenge, Trevor, because whether it's social care leaders or NHS leaders or school leaders or prison governors or taxpayers themselves, we've inherited a country with a massive hole, and I wish we could solve all of the problems all at once, but change is going to take time. We've started, but it is going to take
changes
time.
When you can't... Clearly, you're now telling me you can't afford it. So why are you saying that there's going to be all these changes? Why not simply say we can't afford anything?
Well, hang on a second. We were criticised in the general election campaign, I remember very well, because people saying, well, why aren't you promising more on this, that or the other? We were disciplined in our manifesto because we knew that the promises we made would be promises we'd have to keep. We are keeping our manifesto promises. In fact, we're going further than we did in the manifesto on a number of areas. All I'm saying to people who rightly say, we need to do more on social care. We need to do more on the NHS, more on schools, more on prisons, more to help taxpayers, more to help pensioners, more to help children in poverty. We don't disagree with any of that. But what we're saying is change takes time. We are going
And it
as
takes
far
money.
and as fast as we can. And, of course, it's not just government that's cash-strapped, it's taxpayers. So we can't just pull the tax lever to get Britain out of
2028 is the fastest you can do this. You implemented the Darzi review into the NHS within weeks. You're going to take 3 years even just to get to the proposals.
No, as I said, Louise Casey's first part of the job will report next year. And in terms of where we want to get to, it's not just about the proposals, it's about trying to build cross-party support for a range of options. And that's the approach we're going to be taking. And that's why next month we're going to start talks with all of the other political parties, because I genuinely want them to be involved. I think general election campaigns have been places where social care goes to die. We're not going to repeat the same mistakes that our predecessors made. Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem and SNP, we're trying to do this differently so we don't end up back where we've always been on social care.
All right, let's talk about a story that's doing the rounds today. It's I think a lot of people are paying attention to it. Your colleague, Jess Phillips, rejected the idea of a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Is the reason that that you won't do that is that the one thing that all of these local scandals have in common is the ethnicity, the dominant ethnicity of the gangs involved?
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry, and there's Alexis J, who did that inquiry.
But it barely touched on this topic.
Well, hang on.
She herself says it barely touched on this topic. It was not her job.
So two things. Firstly, a good start, and what I think not just historic victims, but victims today, tomorrow, next week deserve is the full implementation of the Alexis J recommendations. Our predecessors didn't implement one of them. That's the first thing. Secondly,
are you committing to the full implementation?
Yes, we are committed to implementing that report. The second thing to say is in terms of the local inquiries, it was the Rotherham inquiry, led by Louise Casey, that had the guts to turn around and say, actually, part of the problem there was, yes, corruption, but also the fact that some people were not speaking up for fear of being accused of being racist, and some people were not taking action for fear of upsetting community cohesion. That is not acceptable. So in terms of Oldham, what we've said is we would encourage Oldham to have an inquiry. We would absolutely support them doing that. But in terms of a national inquiry, we've already had one. We should actually just get on with it, which is what the Home Secretary is doing. And you mentioned my colleague, Jess Phillips. The other thing I'd say about the Prime Minister and about Jess Phillips, these are two politicians who have one thing in particular in common. Before they came into politics, they had an actual record of banging up rapists, paedophiles and sex offenders. So they don't need lectures from anyone else, particularly the Conservatives, who did not implement those reports about their record, because I think they've got a very strong one, actually, and that's why, as Prime Minister and as Home Office Minister, they can be trusted to make sure that we bang up more sex offenders and paedophiles and rapists.
And when you say anyone else, does that include Mr. Elon Musk, who has said that Jess Phillips should be in jail and Prime Minister allowed paedophiles to get away with it?
Well, it's a ridiculous thing to say. It's ill-informed. It's not fair on either of their records. As Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer opened up historic cases so that people who got away with it, we went after them.
What's your message to Mr. Musk?
I'm not interested in what he's got to say about this. I'm interested in what we're doing as a government, which is actually taking the record and commitment that both the Prime Minister and Jess Phillips and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, have on this issue to deliver the real change that victims deserve so that we see more perpetrators behind bars and more women and girls free to walk the streets safe and unhindered by harassment, intimidation, abuse and worse.
Wes Streeting, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the former editor of the Financial Times, Lionel Barber, current Financial Times Whitehall editor, Lucy Fisher, and the former diplomatic editor at Newsnight, Mark Urban. Lionel, they obviously want to change the agenda here. And I thought his claim, Wes Streeting's claim this morning that they want to get back to pre-pandemic levels before the end of Parliament, quite a bold one.
It is. We won't see the proof in the pudding until well into this Parliament. So I think perhaps focus on what will come out tomorrow. And at least here you have some concrete action. So put some more emphasis on what the GP's doing, not necessarily referring, you have to go through to the consultant to get for your x-rays, this kind of thing, which should speed up the process. I'm pleased to, somewhat relieved actually, that not everything is being kicked into the long grass through reviews. So, look, he has a huge...
Rack up 74 thus far.
Well, quite a lot
I think
of
that's
reviews.
one for every second working day since they got elected.
Yeah, and that seems to have been the default position, apart from, of course, handing out $22 billion to the NHS without any kind of reforms, working practices in return. So I think that's been the worry. There's been a bit of cash up front and not enough emphasis on real practical change. As regarding waiting times, as I say, this won't be clear until well into the Parliament.
Lucy, is this actually something new or that might change the agenda, or is it, if you like, more announcements?
Well, look, they're putting some flesh on the bone of an announcement that they've already made. This was one of Keir Starmer's key 6 milestones that he announced before Christmas, getting waiting lists back to that pre-pandemic level. I think it is the right target. Look, you know, the latest figures, as of the end of October, there were still 7.5 million patients waiting more than that kind of 18-week target for elective treatment. And I think many people do go into the general election, you know, thinking very carefully about healthcare. At the moment, it's the third most important issue to the electorate after the economy and immigration, according to YouGov. But I think they have landed on the right target here. We'll have to see some of the more detail tomorrow about how they intend to meet that. I agree with Lionel. I think it's worrying that they've given £22 billion to the NHS, an extra £3 billion in capital spending. You know, the health service was the big winner in the budget, but there was no quid pro quo, no sort of tying the NHS into reforms that are really going to help them, you know, remain sustainable and, you know, reach these targets in the long term. Many clinicians also very worried about, you know, how these targets might warp other parts of the service and treatment. And the final thing I'd say is that at the moment, you know, we know that we're not going to get the proposals for social care until 2028. We're still waiting for the NHS 10-year plan, which Wes Streeting is going to roll out later this spring. And of course, at the moment, social care is being handled by local government. We've seen a big kind of reform package there. These all seem to be being devised in silos and not together, when we know that social care and elderly patients bed blocking is a big part of the NHS's problem.
I want to go back to the issue of social care in a moment, but Mark, I'm not sure I quite got an answer from Wes Streeting about the effect of this, because sometimes these policies have unintended consequences. And I'm thinking, you offer me choice of 5 hospitals, I'm going to choose what I think is the best one, and though I'm really smart, I suspect pretty much everybody else is just as smart as I am, and they're going to choose the same hospital. Is this going to work?
It's very hard to deliver, isn't it? Especially with the pressures on the various hospitals as they are. I mean, I just listening to that whole interview, get a sense of, hang on a minute, you've got a government with this huge majority. You've come in determined to do things differently to the Tories, to acknowledge the complexity of something like the NHS and social care. But there's this sort of sense almost of momentum just slipping away. To come out with an answer by 2028 or to deal with the waiting list issue over the sort of timescale that's being talked about as well, defence as well, they're talking about trying to get up to the target by the end of the Parliament. You just think, well, this is a government that's supposedly come in with a strict and dirigiste view about delivery, but is saying in so many key sectors, not for a few years. And one wonders about politically what happens at that point. You know, do you then just become a victim? Do you lose political momentum and become victim to everything from Elon Musk to winter viruses and all the other things that just deflect you and stop you achieving the declared aims of the government? It's extraordinary.
What is the noise in Whitehall, Lucy, about this government? You know, their big slogan was change. And I suppose the criticism that's coming from the outside is not seeing really much in the way of change. And they talk about shaking up the civil service and all the rest of it. Is Sir Humphrey quaking in his boots at the moment?
Well, look, I think there was surprise at the lack of adequate planning for government ahead of the election. You know, you've had lots of people. Wes Streeting's been in his brief since 2021. Why hasn't he had a blueprint for the NHS or social care ready to go. And you mentioned all the reviews. You've got a lot coming this spring, whether it's the Strategic Defence Review, welfare reform, AI opportunities, and that could be really key to reforming the public sector and kind of central Whitehall departments. I think there is concern that the pace has been quite sluggish on a lot of key policy issues. And in this kind of era of a 24-hour, very frenetic media cycle in which kind of politicians reach saturation point and overexposure very quickly, and also given the fact that Labour got this seismic majority in the Commons, yes, but only on 34% of the national vote, what people have called this loveless landslide, it means that Keir Starmer and Labour don't have a lot of political capital. You'd have thought they would have wanted to have seized the agenda, get going with some of the big reforms that the public sector is crying out for, rather than all these delays and all this can kicking.
Well, because we go in for reviews and consultations in here, we actually keep a list of it. Lionel, some people might say this is careful, thoughtful government.
No, it's process rather than policy. And the key difference, by the way, with Margaret Thatcher, that now Starmer's people are saying, just think about 1980, 81, Mrs. Thatcher was very unpopular. By 1983, things had turned around. The key thing, though, is that Margaret Thatcher had actually worked on policy. The think tanks, the Institute of Economic Affairs, CPF, Centre for Policy Reform, all these think tanks had done work. And when Margaret Thatcher came in, the first thing she did was actually scrap foreign exchange controls. Huge message to international investors that Britain was changing. What did we get from the government? Well, we're going to build about 1.3 million new houses by
1.5. They'll say
1.5. I'm sorry, I'm 200,000 now. How did I make that mistake? It's all these policy reviews. No, this is the big difference. They were not prepared, and they've really stalled, and it's not really going to be good enough for Keir Starmer to be interviewing ministers about how are you getting on, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. They should have really got out the blocks much faster.
Mark, you talked about the things that might knock them off. Well, we're seeing, and you mentioned Elon Musk, let's bring those two things together. We're seeing this weekend a bit of a kerfuffle over the issue of grooming gangs, what the government's doing. Should there be a national inquiry, or should the government be doing more? Is this the kind of thing, the kind of noise, I guess, that will be unhelpful to Mr. Keir as he starts to try to relaunch the agenda?
I think enormously so. I mean, look, it touches on such profound and difficult issues, intercommunal issues, questions about, the competence or otherwise of the police, the legal authorities, were certain things suppressed. Now, of course, we know, because we're not treating this in the way Elon Musk is, having followed some of these stories for many years, that a lot of these events took place in the early 2010s or in the, so a lot of this is ground that's been gone across, and of course, there have been prosecutions in many of the cases. So to have it all unearthed again at this point, where it's for the historic cases, it's very hard to sort of revisit the justice, I think is really unhelpful. And because it's such an enormously potent issue, child sex abuse, add in, the cultural sensitivities, Islam, white children, all that kind of stuff that Musk has been doing. And I think it's very, very tricky. And I think it's almost unprecedented in a way. I was thinking about it before I came here. For a sort of media baron to be launching an assault on a government in this way. I was thinking about William Randolph Hearst in the late 19th century, an American press baron who effectively tried to take America to war against Spain and more or less succeeded, actually. Yeah. But I mean, that's the only other comparable historical example I can think of, because if this touches off huge social tensions in the north of England, imagine it.
OK. Well, we're going to return to Mr. Musk a little later in the show. Hearst, I hadn't thought about that comparison. Wow. Can make a movie about it. I would call it Citizen Kane. Right, it's coming up to 9 o'clock. You are watching Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In the last hour, the Health Secretary said that he hopes people will end up thanking the government for making tough decisions, like scrapping winter fuel payments for pensioners. Whereas Streeting also had a pretty blunt message to Elon Musk, that his criticism of Keir Starmer's record on grooming gangs is, I'm quoting here, ridiculous, ill-informed and unfair. Well, it's a jam-packed show this morning. Any second now, we'll be hearing from the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Then I'll be speaking live to Reform's Deputy Leader, Richard Tice, before heading north to the north of England to hear from Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. And finally, to sum up the first 6 months for the government, I'll be speaking to political historian and biographer Sir Anthony Seldon. Well, it may be a new year, but an eternal question remains for the Conservatives. To put it in one word, Farage. Reform UK is now nipping at their ankles and since our last programme has overtaken them in membership. So how will they deal with the ever sharper thorn in their side? A little earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Chris Philp, can you confirm that you've been invited to talk to the Health Secretary as part of a process to reach consensus on social care?
Well, I understand they've made an initial preliminary approach to discuss how parties might work together. And in the national interest, we will, of course, engage constructively with that process. But it's very disappointing that after so many years in opposition, Labour, who promised us they had a plan, it turns out they have no plan at all. It's also very disappointing that they, despite before the election promising they would implement the £86,000 cap that we had planned to introduce and had funded in October of this year, they're now saying that is going to be scrapped. So I think the public, once again, will feel very let down by Labour and will feel misled by Labour before the election.
Well, it's worth saying, you won't have seen this, but the Health Secretary's told me this morning that it's possible that cap may come back in if recommended by Louise Casey. So you'd be happy to see that, wouldn't you?
Well, absolutely. It was our policy. But West Streeting, I think about 2 weeks before the election, said that it would be introduced in October of this year, October 2025. Rachel Reeves, just a few weeks after that, after the election, then said it was cancelled. So he appears to be disagreeing with his own Chancellor. The current government position, the current Labour government position, is they're going to scrap it, even though they promised a couple of weeks before the election that they would implement it as we had planned. And that would save families with loved ones in social care, many, many tens of thousands of pounds. So people up and down the country are going to be very disappointed that once again, Labour essentially lied to them before the election.
All right, well, you'll have many opportunities to discuss that with them. Let's talk about your party. Chris, we're always glad to see you on the show.
Glad to be here, Trevor.
But may I ask, while you're here, we haven't seen your leader once. Does she only do interviews with media that she thinks are politically sympathetic?
No, I don't think that's true, and I'm very glad to be here, Trevor. But I'm sorry if my presence brings you any disappointment this new year. But look, Kemi, I'm only teasing. Look, Kemi does huge amounts of media and interviews. She was doing.
She hasn't been on Sky once.
She was doing interviews before Christmas, and I'm sure
she hasn't been on Sky.
I'm sure
once
she'll be on Sky
leader.
before long. I'm sure she'll be on Sky before long.
OK, I'm glad that she will be getting the message from you. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask about was that Sky's boffins have verified that Reform's membership numbers are legitimate. Is your leader going to apologise to Nigel Farage for falsely accusing him of lying?
I don't think so. But if we look at some of the facts, they're very... They're very
Would that be a decent thing to do?
Well, look, I mean, she obviously had information that she based her comments on. But let me talk about...
Shouldn't she just say, I'm sorry, I was misled?
Let me just be clear about some of the most important facts. The most important facts are, since the general election, there have been, I think, 175 council by-elections. We have won 7 times more of those than Reform. We've won about 50. They've only won, I think, 7. We're winning seats from Labour.
Yeah, okay.
Labour are losing seats to us.
Yeah,
Reform...
I get that, but you are glossing over the fact that she directly accused another party leader of lying. Wouldn't it be gracious of her to say, it has been brought to my attention that I was wrong, I may have had bad information, I may have made a mistake, I would like to apologise. That would be new politics, wouldn't it?
Well, look, I don't know what information she had. I don't know what information your boffins have looked at as you very kindly...
we looked at their numbers, we looked at their computer code.
Would they like to be called boffins? Look, so I haven't seen any of that. So, look, I'm not going to offer an opinion one way or the other because I haven't seen the evidence.
All right, let's talk about one of your other leading figures. Yesterday, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, said the following. To sustain order in a multicultural Britain, the state considered it necessary to apply the law selectively. For decades, the most appalling crimes from predominantly British Pakistani men were legalised and actively covered up to prevent disorder. He's talking about the grooming gang scandal. Most of this will have taken place under a Conservative government. Do you agree with him that your government covered up the scandal?
I don't think the government covered up the scandal, but I think there were individual local authorities who did. They were mostly, by the way, Labour-controlled local authorities in places like Oldham. We saw Simon Danchuk, a former Labour MP, the former Labour MP for Rochdale, say that the then chair of the Labour Party told him to not raise this issue because it might cost the Labour Party votes in the Muslim community. And we've seen examples of individual police forces not investigating very serious reports of criminal activity, the gang rape of young girls, for the same, because they were worried about community tensions. All of that was completely wrong, morally bankrupt. Now, there have been some inquiries so far. There was the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that reported about 2 years ago, which covered this issue in part. But we need to go further. We need to completely expose the awful truth about this scandal. And that is why, Trevor, we need a national, comprehensive, statutory public inquiry covering this with the ability to summon witnesses, give evidence under oath to get to the truth.
You're in favour of a national inquiry, I get that. But do you go along with Mr Jenrick's language, for example? He says in his statement that we have been, he doesn't use the word overwhelmed, but he implies by, quote, alien cultures, by which he means Muslims. Is that the sort of language that the Kemi Badenoch Conservative Party is using now?
Well, I think you said yourself, you just paraphrased him rather than...
No, he uses the term alien cultures. Is that Conservative Party language now?
Well, let me tell you what is our language now. Our language is to stand up...
I'm asking you, is what Jenrick said the kind of language that you would use about British Muslims?
Look, he'll choose his words, I'll choose mine. I haven't used those words. What I am going to do, and what Kemi Badenoch will do, and all Conservatives, including Robert, will do, is stand up for these vulnerable young girls who are gang raped in an organised, systemic way over years or decades. The perpetrators were mainly of Pakistani heritage, and local councils, the police, possibly even the CPS, failed those girls by not investigating, in some cases by actively covering up. Simon Danchuk, the former Labour MP, has said that he was instructed by the chair of the Labour Party to not raise these issues because the Labour Party were worried about the electoral implications. This is morally bankrupt, it is totally wrong, and the truth must be exposed.
So Mr Jenrick is freelancing, in a sense, rather in the spirit of Mr Elon Musk.
No, I didn't say he was freelancing. I just said we've chosen different language, and that's absolutely fine. We're different people, we can use different words.
Chris Philp, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
If the wind is in anyone's sails at the moment, it's Reform UK. Having gained 50,000 members in a fortnight, they now claim to be the main opposition, even though you can count their MPs on one hand. But with lingering questions over vetting and the views of top supporters, including Elon Musk, can Reform seriously challenge the status quo for the long haul? Deputy Leader Richard Tice joins me now. Good morning, Mr Tice.
Very good morning to you. Well, the simple answer is yes, we absolutely can. Look at where we are in the polls, Trevor.
I haven't asked you a question yet.
We're in the mid-20s. We're alongside the Tories and the Labour. So yes, the simple answer is the people want reform. We need root and branch reform in this country. Okay. And this appalling rape gang scandal that you've just been...
Hang about. Let's get to that. Let me ask you...
Well, that's the most important issue
first,
of the day,
if we may. This weekend, one of your MPs was heckled by a couple of members who were evidently supporters of Tommy Robinson and the English Defence League. Have you identified and expelled them?
No one's interested in a convicted criminal, Trevor. We're talking about... the most horrific
I'm interested
scandal.
in your members. Have you found the two people who stood up and heckled Lee Anderson and said Tommy Robinson should be freed?
Trevor, are you going to ask questions about the most important horrific scandal?
Yes, I am. But if you get to the point where you answer the question I've asked you.
No one's interested in your juvenile questions about some heckler at some event a couple of nights ago. Focus on the really important things. Do your job properly.
I see. We're starting the new year with a message of peace and goodwill, are we? Let's just deal with the question I asked you, then we can get on to the things you want to talk about. Have you found those two? Have you found the people who heckled Lee Anderson, and do you plan to expel them? Answer yes or no, and then we can get on to the things you want to talk about.
It's irrelevant, Trevor. What's relevant is we want a national inquiry into the most horrific scandal. That's what tens of millions of people are focused on. That's what your viewers want to hear about. Instead, you're pursuing some juvenile line
forgive me, Richard, I know what my viewers want to hear about.
Trevor,
look, what I'm going to take from this, is that,
my dear Trevor,
that Reform
on the reality,
will tolerate
not some
members of the
juvenile
English
heckling
Defence League in their membership, which is fine. Let's talk about the thing you want to talk about.
Let's talk about the important things that
Robert
your viewers
Jenrick,
want to listen and talk about.
Let's talk about the thing you want to talk about. Robert Jenrick yesterday put out a statement which essentially was about this issue of grooming gangs. And what he said was, amongst other things, was that this scandal had started with our importing hundreds of thousands of people from alien cultures. Do you agree with that?
Look, tragically, there has been a massive, massive cover-up of a horrific grooming gang scandal by people mainly of Pakistani heritage, some of whom may be British-born, many of whom may have come to the UK. This has taken place over decades, and authorities, care workers, police workers, the British establishment, senior politicians, and may I say, the mainstream media have turned the other way. And there has been this sort of, this doesn't suit us because we want mass immigration, we want diversity, and this is inconvenient, so we won't explore it.
Well, I don't think that you can accuse Sky of that. Sky's been covering this for years. And if I may say so from a personal point of view, you will know that I was expelled for a while from a particular organisation for talking about exactly this. I just want to get clear where you stand on it rather than what you think about everybody else. Do you agree with Robert Jenrick that the law is being applied differently to different ethnic groups?
I think we definitely do have two-tier justice. I'm afraid we've seen it in 2024 on multiple occasions. And I think with regard to this horrific rape gang scandal, yes, I think we've seen two-tier justice. I think we've seen a form of racism. If white men had sexually abused children of a different skin colour in northern towns, there would have been absolute outrage amongst the mainstream media and the political class. But instead, because it was Pakistani men against white British children, there was no such outrage. There was a deliberate cover-up, and what we need to see is a full, open, transparent inquiry with the possibility of prosecutions to follow, because this is a bigger scandal as the infected blood scandal, as the post office scandal, quite possibly even worse. The simple truth is we don't know. We need to know. That's why we need a full inquiry.
May I ask you something which is of interest to us here at Sky? Nigel Farage has hinted at legal action against Kemi Badenoch after she implied that you'd falsified your membership numbers. As you know, we took a look at it and we said it's fine. We think it's legit. What's happening? What are you doing with the Tories?
Look, the thing about a legal action is you have to prove harm. The truth is that Kemi Badenoch has helped us, so we're sort of thanking her, but what we'd like is an apology. I think Chris Philp has just confirmed we're not going to get an apology, so instead what Nigel announced yesterday is that we're going to instead make her constituency a key target seat for reform at the next general election. We think that might focus the mind of the leader of the opposition actually on what really matters, and that's what voters think. And I think voters are appalled at the suggestion that we were not being truthful about our membership numbers. Look, we all make mistakes, even you, Trevor. When we make them, the simple answer is just apologise and move on.
When I make a mistake with you, Richard, I will definitely apologise. Happily, I haven't had to do that thus far. Let's just ask one last thing about your support. Your perhaps highest profile supporter is Mr. Elon Musk. He is, in this country, even more unpopular than Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer. Is it really smart for Nigel Farage to be cuddling up to him?
Well, I don't accept your premise whatsoever. He's selling some 40,000 fantastic cars totaling a value of some couple of £billion a year.
We like his cars, but not necessarily his politics.
Hang on. You've asked a question. Give me the courtesy of answering. Millions of people use his platform X. Huge numbers use his Starlink platform. So actually, I think Mr. Musk is rather popular and appreciated by many, many people in this country.
But so you're happy to have Elon Musk on your website as a prominent supporter, whether or not he gives you money. By the way, has he given you any money?
He's one of the greatest entrepreneurs in history, and he's got serious investments in this country. He's paying serious quantities of tax in this country. He's producing great products that appeal to people in this country. Quite rightly, he's a great interest in the politics of this country and the economy growing. And at the moment, the economy is going south fast, thanks to this incompetent Labour government.
Richard Tice, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's check in with our panel quickly. Lionel Barber, Lucy Fisher and Mark Urban. Mark, they're very ebullient, I think is the word here.
They absolutely are. And if you talk to senior Conservatives, I was speaking to one just before Christmas, holding up a real possibility that they might have to go into a Farage-led coalition after the next election.
Wow.
If things continue on the current train. Obviously, a long time till the next election. But they've definitely got a lot of Conservatives very worried, that's for sure. As to whether it's really scalable, you know, the UKIP precedent is very interesting. Completely different question.
What do you reckon, Lucy?
Well, look, for me, the jury's out. You know, I followed UKIP very closely. In 2015, they got 3.9 million votes, 13% of the national vote share in the general election. That's almost identical to what Reform got in 2024. And so, you know, is there a cap on this sort of a right of Tory party sort of movement in the UK? I'm not sure. The other thing I just point out is don't forget that in 2018, Nigel Farage himself quit UKIP because he said it had a fixation on Islam. He said he was uncomfortable about the direction it was heading, and he was very critical of its links to Tommy Robinson. So you can see some of those same issues beginning to beset the Reform Party now.
Reform has a magic quality at the moment. I use that word guardedly. It's called energy. It's the party with the easy answers. And it has somebody called Elon Musk, one of the richest person in the world with a massive platform, who's making the political weather for them. He's raising this whole issue of rape gangs, grooming culture, calling for a national inquiry, calling for the end of the government, new elections. That's what they have behind them. Big question is it sustainable? Will they get money from Musk, and on what terms? With money, 50 million, if not 100 million, they could do a lot. You're seeing defections. I think there is a real prospect, to pick up what Mark's saying, if this trend continues, the energy continues, you can see the Conservatives flagging and a reverse takeover.
The Labour Party keeps muttering about clamping down on foreign donations. Anybody think that they actually might do that?
If this money is really, if it's real money, it's not going to be a bouncing check, then I think they might actually well, because it's a real threat. You look at the Conservative finances versus Reforms, if they get the money.
But it needs legislation, and it depends on how speedy such a donation might come. It would take time for this to go through Parliament and close off the loopholes that, loopholes as some people see them, that currently exist.
And it'd be hard to work out how you would stop a British domiciled firm, and he's got several, Musk,
and he's just incorporated a new one.
He's just started a new one, has he?
Incorporated a new one in the UK, which people think could be the vehicle he could use.
OK. Well, we will return to Mr Musk a little later in the show. Is further devolution the key to get Britain moving? We'll speak live to the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free. wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Labour's push to further devolve powers could prove a defining feature of their term in office. The Mayor of Greater Manchester is already making the most. From tomorrow, the region's buses will be fully under public control for the first time in 40 years. I can speak now to Andy Burnham, joining us live from Manchester. Good morning.
Good morning, Trevor.
It's a charming snowscape you've got there, but can you update us?
I'm in Wigan, actually, or Goulburn, more to be more precise. It's not the Alps where I'm speaking to you from. I'm not on a skiing holiday.
OK, well, I thought you were opening a new resort there. But anyway, what's the situation, if you wouldn't mind telling us, on Manchester Airport and generally? What are you advising people to do? Stay at home?
This morning, that is the advice for people not to travel unless absolutely essential. Where I'm talking to you from now, Trevor, so near Lee, between Wigan and Lee, I would say 4 inches of snow here. So the roads are being gritted as we speak, and efforts are being taken to keep everything running. But there's been disruption at the airport. We're expecting rain mid-morning, so we do expect the snow to start to clear as the day progresses.
What did you make of West Streeting's advice to people to layer up and turn up the heating, given that the government isn't paying for the heating anymore? Is that wise?
I think, well, it's what the Department for Health would say every year, isn't it? I mean, that's standard. But obviously, you know, we're in a cold snap now, and we'll be working hard here for sure with the warm banks that our councils operate to ensure that people can find the warmth this winter. It's going to be a challenging few days for sure. But you know, we're running, and we've made a big change to our buses. Actually, they've come under public control this morning, Trevor. Overnight, we've made a huge change, the biggest change to buses in the UK for decades. Half of our system has come back under public control, which means now we're fully in control of all of our buses after 40 years of very damaging deregulation. So, although it's tricky and the weather is posing challenges, Greater Manchester has actually brought through a major change to public services at a time when it has felt like the country has gone backwards. Well, we've bucked that trend and we've delivered on time and on budget.
Thank you for that brilliant segue into the next question I wanted to ask you. Is this new control of this bit of transport a harbinger of things to come, that essentially, bit by bit, you want the Greater Manchester Combined Authority essentially to take control of services in your area, reaching to health and so on as well?
Now we can look back, Trevor. I think the 80s and the 90s brought some pretty disastrous policy when essentials that we need for life, I'm talking about water, energy, electricity, buses, trains, you know, they were broken up and sold off. And I think that's left the country in a really difficult position where people are paying much more for their energy here than elsewhere in Europe. Obviously, we see the sewage in the rivers and in our seas. And here in Greater Manchester, when it comes to buses, routes were cut year after year. Fares went up year after year. The number of passengers went down. That is what happened as a result of, you know, as I say, kind of selling off life's essentials. And absolutely, yes, to answer your question, I want to see those things, those basic things, come back under public control. We've started with the buses, but the next plan, and that phase of the B network, which is our public transport, our new public transport system, is to bring 8 rail lines into the B network. Let's get those back under stronger public control, more accountable to people. But I would want to go further, and I have called for a major programme of council house building, different to social housing. If you allow councils to build more homes that people can truly afford, that gives them more control over the housing situation in their areas. And it's restoring that public control, rolling back the 1980s. That, I think, is what devolution can do to get the essentials working better for people at prices they can afford.
Well, this is quite a big vision, Mr. Mayor. And let me ask you 2 things about this. First of all, last time I talked to Angela Rayner, which was just before Christmas, she said, for example, on the issue of housing and planning, she wants you to have as much power as you can have, but she was pretty clear, if there's a conflict, she is in charge. And second, her friend Rachel Reeves, listening to what you've just said, is going to say straight away, that's a lot of money. You are heading for a conflict with Westminster, aren't you?
No, I don't think so. So on the first point, when you talk about the Secretary of State for Communities, the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner still having the step-in powers over planning, I would support that because sometimes things can't be resolved at a local level. So I'm not calling for any change there. On the second point, I think the country has to change how it thinks about housing. It is the single best investment this country could make to build a new generation of council housing. And I would say low carbon, because it's not about giving people just homes that are cheaper to rent, it's homes that are cheaper to run as well, with lower bills. That is a real solution to the challenges that this country faces right now. And if people have a good home, it's less likely that they end up in hospital or need other support. So that is a big investment in the country's future. It actually will help reduce public spending in the long run. So that is what I'm saying to the government. And of course, Angela Rayner supports what I'm saying. I just want to be freed up now to go fast with our 10 councils in building that new generation of council housing in Greater Manchester.
You will be as aware as anybody else of the controversy that's surrounding, once again, the issue of what's called grooming gangs. Dozens of men were convicted within Greater Manchester. Many of the victims have alleged that these crimes were widely known about. The government has refused to institute a national inquiry. Would there be a case for an inquiry within your area, Greater Manchester? This is something that you could do.
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that question because it suggests that you don't know what I've already done. There has been and is an ongoing major inquiry, and there has been a substantial report into what happened in Oldham. And as a result of that inquiry, there is a major police investigation. And as a result, there have been multiple arrests, charges and convictions. And that obviously seems to be lost on you. And I think there's a danger here, rather than dealing in facts, people are going straight to propaganda about the issue.
I'm fully aware of the inquiry in Oldham, but we also know that this happened in Rochdale. We also know that there were examples elsewhere in Manchester. So what I'm really asking is whether there is a case for an inquiry that goes beyond the individual local council.
Yes, there is, and I'm not in any way, I'm not directly answering that question. And in fact, I did order that overarching inquiry that you are talking about, actually within days of coming into office as Mayor of Greater Manchester. If we go back to May 2017, literally when I was elected and came in my first few days, the Betrayed Girls documentary was broadcast by the BBC. And I was travelling around one day and I heard Maggie Oliver on Radio 5 Live talking about a major police investigation in Manchester. Yes, I heard her giving a long interview on the BBC talking about how a police investigation, a major investigation into grooming and child sexual exploitation in Manchester had been stood down overnight. And I, in that moment, said, well, I can't hear that and not act on that. And it was on that precise piece of information that I acted, obviously, with the Betrayed Girls documentary as well, and said that there had to be a wide-ranging, overarching inquiry into how Greater Manchester had handled this issue in the past. And that led to a report on Manchester. It led to a report on Oldham, which was requested by Oldham Council, and it led to a third report on Rochdale, which was published pretty much a year ago, and you'll remember the coverage of that. We're now in a final stage of that inquiry, which is looking at whether the public here can have confidence now that things are as they should be.
Just very briefly, Andy, Maggie Oliver, who you mentioned, I saw yesterday, said that Keir Starmer is as responsible for not tackling this issue as any other individual. That's pretty brutal, isn't it?
Well, I go back to what I said before about it's really important that we deal with facts rather than, as I say, political statements. I'm not saying that that's what Maggie Oliver did, but you look online and there's a huge amount of uninformed speculation, statements that don't connect to the facts. In relation to the precise issue, as Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer made fundamental changes to address the problem that's at the heart of this, which is when victims came forward in the past, the response, the immediate response often was not to believe those girls when they came forward. And not to take forward those investigations. And that's what the review that I have ordered has revealed. And he made changes so that the victims were heard and what they said was acted upon. So, by all means, Trevor, we've been dealing with this issue for a number of years now. I welcome the discussion of whether there should be a national inquiry. All I hear is lots of politicians who have shown no interest in the investigation I ordered, who are now making grand statements about it.
Andy,
well,
I'm sorry to cut.
They should have been working with us a few years ago.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we've run out of time. Thank you for your time this morning.
All right. You're welcome.
After this short break, we'll reflect on Labour's first 6 months in government with the political historian, Sir Anthony Seldon.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
It's 6 months today since Keir Starmer first stood in Downing Street promising a government of service and change. As the saying goes, time flies when you're having fun. One wonders how long those 6 months have felt in number 10. The economy is flatlining, inflation's up, and Labour's approval rating is down. With 4 years until the next election, does history suggest that they can turn their fortunes around? Well, who better to ask than the political historian, Sir Anthony Seldon. Anthony, has any Labour Prime Minister had a worse first 6 months?
No, none have had a worse 6 months. He's managed to alienate most people across the board, but it is not too late. The big question, Trevor, is can he learn from his mistakes and can he be different from January onwards? If he can learn, then there's no reason why he can't go on, do a full term and with a creditable rating for his government. If he doesn't learn, then I think after the May elections, people will start concluding that the problems we saw in the first 6 months, which were very much his own problems, lack of preparation, lack of the ability to ask, how do I be Prime Minister? How can you be Prime Minister? What does the Prime Minister do? He didn't ask these questions. If things don't improve, I think it's going to be very grim for him.
Well,
People will conclude that the problems of the first 6 months were not just one-off start-up problems that all Prime Ministers have. They'll think it was chronic.
This is very interesting because is this about Starmer or is this about the inheritance, as ministers keep coming in and telling me?
Well, one thing that great leaders do is they don't endlessly blame other people. They don't blame the opposition. They don't blame the civil service. They don't blame their inheritance. They just get on and do it. So rather than have a coherent plan for government, above all, based on growth. What's the one thing that matters above all else after virtually zero growth for the 15 years since the global financial crisis? Growth. He should have been doing everything, as he said, actually, to work with business, to work with the creative aspects of the economy, to get the whole country working together to get behind growth. Only if there's growth will Brexit be made sense of. Will there be the money for the health service, for social care, for prisons, for schools, all these things, transport?
You light on the issue of the economy and growth. And, of course, that is a two-person job, isn't it? You've written quite a lot about the relationship between number 10 and number 11, Prime Minister and Chancellor. These two seem in lockstep, but it doesn't always end up that way. What's your reckoning here? Do Reeves and Starmer rise together and fall together, or...?
Well, you need creative tension. The best times that it's worked are when there's been an element of a frisson between them, because the Treasury can be very plodding, anti-growth, pro-establishment, just not open enough to the forces of creativity that make countries grow. So you need the Treasury, a lot of very good people in it, the Chancellor. Naturally, always throughout history, they're the second Lord of the Treasury. They are thinking primarily of their own career, their own future. Rachel Reeves doesn't seem to have ambitions at the moment, but lots of chancellors say that. The Prime Minister is first Lord of the Treasury. The Prime Minister's primary job is to stop the country going bust. As Churchill once said, what are your two priorities, Prime Minister? It's red meat and stopping the country going bust. I mean, that's what the Prime Minister does as First Lord of the Treasury. He has to get growth. So it's odd that he's now got somebody as Cabinet Secretary who hasn't been in the Treasury, Principal Private Secretary, not been in the Treasury either. It's odd to have that combination. I mean, they're both really good people, but you need to have somebody with nous. He needs more... he's hardly got any people around his cabinet table who understand how the private sector works. How do you generate money? What is growth? How do you work with business? How do you get the creative parts of the economy going? This is not anti-Labour, it's pro-Labour. It gives you the money to do the things that need to be done after 14 years of really poor, historically the worst period of Tory government since the party was formed in the 1830s and 1840s. So much needs to be done. You need the dosh. Well, he needs to drive it.
Well, you've now mentioned the Conservatives, and of course, one thing that always saves governments in trouble is the fact that the opposition may look even worse. The Tories should be rather cheerful about Labour's problems, but they're looking rather miserable. What do you think's going on there?
Well, they didn't have a good period in government. It's much easier to come off the back of a very strong period. In 1997, William Hague could look back at Margaret Thatcher, but also John Major, underrated Prime Minister, and see a really solid block of achievement for the Conservative government. It's very hard for Kemi Badenoch to look back and say, you know, we did a lot, we did it better, because the Tories didn't do it better. I mean, education was a rare example of a good policy sector.
The Michael Gove reform.
The Michael Gove reforms carried on by Nick Gibb, not perfect, but really something you look back to there, something solid. So there's not enough for her to look back on. What on earth, Trevor, does the Tory party believe in 2025? There's an existential crisis that the party hasn't known for 190 years. that people have very different interpretations. You've never had such a powerful challenger as Reform or such a powerful leader of an insurgent party as Farage.
Well, indeed, he's the only person who seems to be smiling in the new year.
He can't do anything else. He doesn't know how not to smile. I mean, it's a permanent expression.
We've seen these third-party surges before, though. Is this one different?
Well, as Peter Kellner, brilliant analyst, says, there have been 6 times since 1945 when there have been a third-party surge that has achieved a higher percentage in polling than the 2 main parties, than Conservatives and Labour. But they've disappeared apart from one time, which was the Liberals and Social Democrats, when 23, 25 Labour MPs defected to the Social Democrats, really serious. But then something happened, the Falklands War, that kind of wiped out that great, that prolonged period of several months when the Libs, SDP, were ahead of Labour and Conservatives. So that was the one period since 1945 when this has been, when there's been this third-party dominance. Now that's beginning to happen now, and it's not just one challenge. We've also got challenge from the Greens. So it's a multi-party challenge and a strong Liberal Party. So who knows? I mean, I think it just adds to the sense that administratively, in Keir Starmer's in tray, and by the way, I think I'm going to come back to that point, Trevor. If he does the right things now, there's no reason why he can't get on top of this, but he has to learn from the mistakes he made in the first 6 months. So he's got a massive in tray, unprecedented for a Labour MP. He's got of administrative things, from prisons all the way through health, social care. He's also, and kicking it into touch isn't good enough. He's also got a faltering economy. He's got huge political problems, and that's even before we get into the volatile world with what on earth is Xi going to do, what's happening in Ukraine, can we afford the missile defences, and President Trump. So this is going to be, look, it's going to be, you're going to have great programmes this year, Trevor, because we're going to be on the edge of our seats watching how 2025 unfolds.
Why don't you come back in the middle of the year, Anthony, and do a report card for us?
If invited, I'd love to.
Anthony Seldon, thank you very much for your time this morning. In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting.
Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's speak one final time to our panel. Lionel Barber, Lucy Fisher and Mark Urban. Lucy, is this reform surge different to the previous ones that Anthony Seldon was just talking about?
I think we have to see. You know, I've followed Farage around his predictions of sparking a political earthquake. But for some of the reasons we've discussed, you know, in this programme, the potential for a mega donation, which would make reform a permanent fixture, the vacuum left by the Conservatives, they seem to be quite low energy. Kemi Badenoch, you know, provoking a lot of grumbles among her own ranks about how low visibility she's being and how little kind of she's putting out there about the Tories' future direction. It does feel that Reform are stepping into the breach at a time when, you know, Labour's sagging popularity also means that people think we've had 14 years of the Tories, they didn't fix the public services. Not sure about Labour. Should we try a third option?
We didn't quite get to it with that, Anthony, but the other factor here is that previous third-party surges were a single party, or single alliance, let's say, but now we've got Reform, Greens, SNP and Liberal Democrats all scoring in the teens.
Yeah, but I think the party to watch is Reform and the degree to which you have defections from the Conservative Party, and as Lucy says, money. I mean, I think the SNP has got a long way to come back, and I think the Greens are very, very fringe.
Mark, this, of course, is not just a domestic phenomenon. In fact, we've just seen last night that the Austrian government is pretty much on the collapse because the Freedom Party, which is essentially the Trump-Farage equivalent there, they've tried to freeze them out of government and failed. Is something international happening here?
Well, I mean, evidently, you know, people have been talking since 2015, 2016 about the populist wave, haven't they? And the emergence of parties and politicians preaching fundamentalist solutions to complex problems. And of course, the reform surge is a new manifestation of that. The energy having switched from exiting the EU suddenly now to immigration, there's amazing shapeshift. But I think one of the things we come back to again and again with Farage is he's pretty much the only person in the UK political scene at the moment doing effective retail politics. I mean, it should be possible to contest a lot of these narratives. But the other parties don't seem to be able to find that, to find that kind of political energy and even vision. You know, it's just fascinating watching someone like that, a movement like that, exploit what is effectively a political vacuum.
And I'm being reminded that we now have governments which are basically on the brink of collapse in France, Germany, Netherlands, Spain.
Canada.
Canada, of course, as well. And behind all of this, somebody who... you were saying earlier on, this is sitting up all night, Xing or tweeting away, encouraging all of these tendencies. Mr. Musk, how much does he matter?
I think he does matter, and I think we should be worried by how intemperate and hyperbolic his language is, calling Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, evil, saying she should be in prison, and the spread of misinformation, or I should say perhaps disinformation, you know, endorsing the idea that Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner who has been jailed for his views rather than for contempt of court, and the way he's attacking Keir Starmer.
Knows, or do you think he's just...
I think he doesn't understand. You know, last night he was tweeting, calling for His Majesty King Charles III to call another election. He clearly doesn't have much purchase on the way that UK politics works, but it is a big problem for Keir Starmer, in my view.
He has no idea about... He's never been to Oldham. He has no idea about criminal justice system in this country. He talks about Tommy Robinson being in solitary confinement, which is only... that this happens to rapists or whatever, serious criminal. He has that. This could be because he's beaten up somebody in prison. I mean, the level of ignorance that he displays. So the question is, what do we do? How do we counter? In my view, the government should be thinking about every time Musk speaks, do exactly the opposite. And the second is belittle him. Find a way of winding him up. And the third is to use our secret weapon in Washington coming up, Peter Mandelson, who's very good at taking down people. The Trump whisperer is needed in 2025.
Mandelson versus Musk, Mark. You lay bets.
I think picking up from Lionel's point, I think this is sufficiently serious as a factor now in politics globally that you can't just be passive. I think it's one thing for the government not to publicly react in any way or feed it. That's all, you know, don't feed the trolls. It's all perfectly sensible. But to come up with some strategies that either, as you say, put the boot of ridicule in, or to use a weapon like Mandelson. If Mandelson can whisper into Trump's ear all sorts of things that Musk might have been saying to Trump's detriment, things like that, if you can drive a wedge between them, then I think there's a scope for some good old sort of Elizabethan age diplomacy here and a chance to actually try and, you know, open a bit of a wedge here, because it seems to be an inherently unstable combination, Trump and Musk.
Well, just very quickly, Lucy, $500 billion wields a lot of influence, though, doesn't it?
Well, it certainly does. And that's only one reason to be concerned. He's the world's richest man. And, of course, he's heading into Trump's administration. But let's see how long that bromance lasts.
That is it for us from today. Glad to be back. We're back next Sunday. And by the way, tune in to Sophie on the Politics Hub, weeknights at 7.